I'm here in Pilsen, Czech Republic, and this here is a monument that is dedicated to the American liberators that liberated this city. And now you may wonder, but wait a second, I thought the Soviets drove out the Nazis from Czechia. Well, for the large part, but a part of the country was liberated by the Americans, led by General Patton. This here is a story about the forgotten American liberation of a part of Czechia. Keep watching. Good to have you back on the channel. If you're new, my name is Stefan. I'm a Dutch history teacher and I like to cover history on location. I'm now in the Czech city of Pilsen. If you find these on location videos interesting, consider subscribing and also hit that notification bell. With the occupation of the Czech lands by the Germans in March 1939, the dismemberment of Czechoslovakia was completed. Earlier, the Czechs had to cede the Sudeten area to the Germans after the Munich Conference, here in Czechia known as the Munich Betrayal. Slovakia became an Axis puppet state, and also Hungary and Poland took parts of the country. Czechia under German rule was known as the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. The Nazis introduced a wartime-focused economic system. Regarding social development, the forced labor regime played a crucial role in Germany and the Protectorate. The Czech lands were very vital for the German war economy, since there were many war factories located in the Czech lands. In November 1941, a Jewish ghetto was established in Terezín, also known as Theresienstadt, which was a transfer station to the death camps. From January 1942 to October 1944, mass deportations took place and the majority of the 118,300 Czech Jews perished in the gas chambers. Thousands of Roma and Sinti were also deported, of which most were murdered as well. Slovakia had become an Axis puppet state. Now, towards 1944, many Slovaks realized that their puppet state was not going to last, as the Soviets were ready to push into the country. But then, the Slovaks launched an uprising against the Nazis, which became known as the Slovak National Uprising. The Slovak army fought against the Germans. Eventually, this uprising was crushed and the Germans took over the country. Nevertheless, the Soviets advanced into the country and pushed the Germans out and reached Bratislava in April 1945. And from there, they were planning to advance on Prague, the Czech capital. The Slovak National Uprising resulted in an intensification of Czech resistance activities. They were also held by USSR parachutists that were dropped in the area. But they were not able to set up an effective resistance against the occupier, mainly due to the fact that there were so many German troops stationed in the Protectorate. Towards the end of April 1945, the front line moved between the areas of Brno, Vyškov and Žilina and Ostrava in the east. Within the ranks of the Red Army fought men of the Czechoslovak 1st Army Corps. And in the west, the Americans were ready to push into Bohemia from Germany. Inside Prague, German General Rudolf Tussaud prepared his garrison to defend the capital. But it didn't come to a large battle between Soviet and German forces, and that was because of the Prague Uprising. Let's take a look at the Americans first. The US troops that would liberate the western part of Czechoslovakia were part of the American 5th Corps and had experienced heavy battles, starting on the 6th of June with Operation Overlord on Omaha Beach, the subsequent breakthrough from Normandy, and the enclosing from the Falaise Pocket. They helped liberating Paris and moved via Sedan to the borders of the Third Reich. After the Ardennes offensive, they marched further into Germany and advanced on Leipzig. On the 18th of April, the first American troops of the 19th Infantry Division entered the Czech territory close to the town of Hranice. The army of General George S. Patton proceeded further along the border through Bavaria and headed south to Austria. American General Omar Bradley issued orders to his troops to treat Czechoslovakia as an allied country, which included the territories of the Sudeten area that were ceded to Germany after the Munich Agreement, known here as the Munich Betrayal. The Americans had around 15,000 soldiers to advance into the country. At that time, the Soviets were advancing from the east, and their Prague operation was to involve over 2 million men. Bear in mind that the Germans had around 1 million soldiers in the area. These were part of Army Group Center and commanded by hardliner Field Marshal Ferdinand Schörner. Schörner was notorious for his iron discipline and oversaw the execution of countless of stragglers and deserters from his side. The German German troops managed to seize the border region with the mountains, and from there they could fire on the incoming Americans, who basically had to fight their way up. The Americans were assisted by US air fighters who reduced many buildings in the area to rubble. Although the Germans put up resistance, the disintegration of the Wehrmacht became visible. For example, the capitulation of the 11th Tank Division of Lieutenant General Wendel von Wietersheim. Here, over 9,000 perfectly tidy and equipped German soldiers surrendered as soon as the Americans arrived. The surrendering tank division still had considerable combat power, giving up, for example, 700 trucks, 300 cars, 85 personnel carriers, almost 40 tanks and 59 artillery guns during the capitulation. Tank General Edward von Kleist surrendered in the Veserubi Pass. The heaviest losses the Americans endured during their advance in the Czech lands was in the village of Jury in the Šumava mountain. They were ambushed by the Germans and lost 10 men killed in action and around the same number wounded in action. As the Americans threw in all their might, they overcame the defenders. On the same day, Domažlice and Klatovy were liberated as well. On the early morning of May 6th, the American vanguard of the American 16th Armored Division entered the city. They were fired at by German snipers who hid in the higher buildings, but the Americans quickly took them out. They were assisted by Czech resistance fighters who had launched an uprising against the Germans simultaneously.
Při přestřelkách nechyběli ani civilní občané. Zaprvé ukazovali Američanům, kde by mohli být nějací nepřátelé, a za druhé, pokud měli zbraně, se také pokoušeli spolu s Američany tyto nepřátele zlikvidovat.
The citizens of Pilsen welcomed their liberators with food, drinks and flowers. Now, I read that the famous local beer, Pilsner, was not among the drinks because earlier the American warplanes had accidentally bombed the Pilsner brewery, which they mistook for a weapon factory. The German commander of the city, General George von Majewski, submitted capitulation and then shot himself in front of his staff and even his own wife. Together with the Soviets, the Americans had set out the Karlsbad-Pilsen-Budweis demarcation line, which US forces were forbidden to cross. Between the Soviet and American zone, there was a several kilometers wide interzone without any soldiers. Yet, some Americans did cross the line. On the 5th of May, the Prague Uprising started. The Czech resistance had seized the radio station and broadcasted to citizens to rise up against the German occupier. Even some 20,000 men of the pro-Axis Russian Liberation Army led by Andrei Vlasov joined them, while many Wehrmacht soldiers surrendered or tried to escape. SS fought back fanatical. While the uprising was going on, an American jeep arrived on the main square of Prague. Now, the Czechs believed that this was the vanguard of Pattons' army. That evening, a meeting took place between the American soldiers and the leaders of the Czech resistance. Now, the Americans said they could easily take the city. One of the Czech officers wanted to come with the Americans to meet Patton in person. He was taken to the US headquarters here in Pilsen. Now, Patton was so impressed by the account of the Czech officer that he asked his superior, Omar Bradley, to advance on Prague. Bradley said it wasn't his decision to make. It was up to Eisenhower. Bradley phoned Eisenhower, who told him that the halt line through Pilsen was mandatory. Patton was in no circumstances to march on Prague. US President Harry Truman and Commander Eisenhower did not want a confrontation with Stalin, as they viewed Eastern Europe as the war spoils after losing millions of Soviet lives in defeating the Nazis. General Patton had thus received orders to stop his westward advance before reaching Prague. This was his last action of World War II. He would die in a car crash in December 1945 in Germany. Now, by that time, the Americans had retreated from Czechia. They had stayed there till the autumn of 1945, and they enjoyed good relations with the local population, who were sad to see them leave. Also, they processed many German soldiers who wanted to surrender to the Americans rather than to fall in the hands of the Red Army. Even after the armistice, German soldiers that had hid themselves tried to make their way to the west. Also, SS soldiers wanted to reach Germany and live the rest of their lives in obscurity. But once these were captured by the Czechs, they were often killed on the spot. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a like. If you want to learn about another part where the Americans advanced too far, click here to check out the video about the forgotten World War II Battle of Leipzig. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.